If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and share it. For these reasons, the Soviet Union collapsed 33 years ago. In December 1922, the Treaty on the Establishment of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the Soviet Union, was officially ratified. This treaty created a union between a group of Soviet republics that had existed since 1919. According to it, a new federal government was established, whose functions were centered in the capital, Moscow. In addition, the treaty was approved by delegations from the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, the Transcaucasian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, and the Byelorussian Soviet Socialist Republic. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union later expanded to include other regions before disintegrating after about 69 years for many reasons ranging from economic, social, military, and ethnic. Economic reasons. At the beginning of the last decade of the 20th century, the Soviet Union was the largest country in the world in terms of area, with an area estimated at about 1/6 of the total land area of the globe, amounting to more than 22 million square kilometers. On the other hand, no less than 290 million people from dozens of ethnicities lived in the Soviet lands. Despite this vast area and the diversity of natural resources that were available in huge quantities, the Soviet economy, which was described as the second largest economy in the world, faced many difficulties, as shortages of goods were a routine matter while money was worthless. Despite having enough money, many Soviet citizens were unable to obtain goods and a life of luxury due to the severe shortage in production. Often, the central authorities determined the quantities of goods to be produced, thus creating a state of deficit between the balance of production and purchase. On the other hand, this policy contributed to the penetration of the black market and its dominance over a significant proportion of social and economic life. Meanwhile, Gorbachev's perestroika reforms did not serve the Soviet economy as wages increased through printing more money, which fueled inflation. The economy was also vulnerable to external influences and international conditions. Previously, the Soviet Union was the largest producer of oil and natural gas, and its economy depended on the revenues from these resources. With the decline in oil prices between 1980 and 1986, the Soviet Union faced catastrophic economic repercussions that hastened its collapse. Military reasons. In the context of the Cold War, the Soviet Union directed a large percentage of its resources towards military industry and the military budget. According to Western estimates, the Soviets directed 1/5 of their gross domestic product to support the military. During the 1970s and 1980s, Soviet military spending increased significantly. Despite the economic crises that the country went through, the military was not affected much as it maintained the value of the budget allocated to it and enjoyed good funding. On the other hand, the Soviet military lost its prestige on the global level following its intervention in Afghanistan. After its victories in World War II and its intervention to suppress the Hungarian Revolution and the Prague Spring, the Soviet army suffered from the woes of the Afghan quagmire and failed to achieve its goals despite sending about 1 million soldiers there. At the same time, the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan after losing tens of thousands of soldiers between dead and wounded. The Soviets also lost hundreds of warplanes due to American surface-to-air missiles obtained by the Afghans. On the domestic front, the glasnost policy of freedom of expression and the press, established by Gorbachev, opened the door to the rise of voices opposing the war within the Soviet Union, as many demanded the return of their sons to their homes and spoke of the collapse of the Soviet army. In the Baltic states, many sympathized with Afghanistan and spoke in turn about the occupation of their countries and their forcible annexation to the Soviet Union by Stalin. As a result, nationalism and independence tendencies grew in these countries. Internal reasons and loss of confidence. Internally, after the adoption of glasnost, Soviet citizens lined up to read liberal newspapers that published articles by philosophers and dissidents. At the same time, they also gathered in front of McDonald's restaurants, the first of which opened in 1990 in Moscow, to taste Western meals and fast food. On the other hand, Soviet citizens lost their confidence in the state after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986. At that time, the Soviet authorities concealed the truth of the disaster and criticized the statements of the Western media, accusing them of lying and misleading public opinion by exaggerating the disaster. For its part, Moscow spoke of a minor disaster, while radiation levels were 400 times higher than those recorded in Hiroshima, and demanded that Victory Day celebrations be held throughout the country in 1986. Due to the accumulation of all these circumstances, the collapse of the Soviet Union became a matter of time. With the acceleration of events in the Eastern Bloc and the fall of the communist regimes, the Soviet Union collapsed and dissolved between December 25 and 26, 1991.